everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. In Nigeria here, it is in the afternoon, and we're happy to have you join us for this webinar today, where we'll be discussing strategies for security funding for entrepreneurs and innovators within academic ecosystems. But before we start, we would like you to do a few things just to set the tone and ensure that everything goes well. First, check your camera and sound of your devices to ensure that everything is going well. And please introduce yourself in the chat. We want to know where you're joining us from, your institution, your country, and your role. So please introduce yourself in the chat. I can see Fuad. Welcome, Fuad. Welcome, Sinawo. Welcome, Sayu. Welcome, Phillips. Welcome, Zelamen. Please introduce yourself in the chat box so that we can welcome you properly. Welcome, Abubakar. Welcome, Louise. Welcome, Tenen. Welcome, Sarah. Welcome, Matthew. Welcome, Harrison. Welcome, Albert. We're really happy to have you on this call today. Please introduce yourselves in the chat box, your name, the country you're joining us from, your institution, and your role. Welcome, Mohammed from Somali. Welcome, Phillips from Landmark University. We are happy to have you here. Please keep introducing yourself while we just go through some of the ground rules for this call. We would like you to switch on your camera if you can. We would also encourage you to participate actively. Use the chat box to share your comments, to share your opinions and questions, and mute your microphone unless you want to speak. We also encourage you to give everyone the space to participate so that it can be a very engaging session. I can see that we still have more people introducing themselves. Welcome, Rage from Somalia. Welcome, Matthew from Abuja. Welcome, Zelamen from Ethiopia. Abad from Ethiopia. Messi from Ethiopia. We are really happy to have you here. Welcome, Maggie from Canada. It's a pleasure to have you here. And without further ado, we will just go through this live session guide. This session is in both French and English. So you will click, if you want to listen in French, click the three dots by your right. You will see the translation sign, the global icon. Click on it and set your language to French. If you're listening in English, there's no need to do this. But if you want to listen to French, click on this global icon to set your language to French. And please don't forget to mute the original audio so that you can only listen to your preferred language alone. Welcome, Sina. Welcome, Joyce. Welcome, Sylvian. Welcome, Samson from Ethiopia. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Dr. Harrison from Ghana. We're really happy to have you here today, and we're sure that you're going to learn a lot from this session. So we know that you have been receiving emails from us, but before we start the session, we'd just like to talk about what we do. Who is ICT Africa? What is the organization about? So we're a leading development consulting and advisory firm, and we implement human capital and research projects in Africa. And we do this within the international development, higher education, digital innovation, and entrepreneurship space. And we have been operating for 10 years. We have trained over 8,000 people in entrepreneurship and employability programs, targeting at least 70% women. We have also disbursed over $120,000 to entrepreneurs to help scale and grow their business. And we have improved capacity of 62 HEIs to better support students and to better support students entrepreneurs. And we have done this impact across the 45 African countries. Now about the ICT Africa HEI innovation practices. In ICT Africa, we have two practices, the creative practice and the HEI innovation practice. But for the purpose of this call, we'll be talking about the HEI innovation practice, which is focused on empowering higher education institutions across Africa for innovation and entrepreneurship. And we do this first by launching targeted innovation programs such as this webinar. We do ecosystem building and needs assessment, strategic planning and development, technology transfer guide, and a lot of other technical support that we provide. In 2025, we're looking to do more of this to strengthen this community that you're already a part of, share more opportunities via the community, enable share stakeholders across all African countries to better connect and network with each other. We also aim to deepen our research in the space to find out what is happening within the HEI entrepreneurship ecosystem and disseminate this accordingly. We're also looking to provide access to finance support, sharing funding opportunities with HEIs across Africa, and also provide technical support such as technology transfer. So, in one word, we would like you to tell us what is that one thing that you're looking to take away from this session. Please type it in the chat box. Let's hear what is that one thing that you're looking to take away from this session. Welcome, Emil. I can see Emil is on the call. Welcome, Prince. Welcome, Uchi. Please just type in the chat box the one thing that you're looking to take away from this session, and we would go into the main session in some minutes. Welcome, Peter from South Sudan. We're really happy to have you here. Welcome, Solomon from Ethiopia. We're really happy to have you here. Please tell us one thing you're looking to take away from this session. What's that one thing that you're looking to learn? Welcome, Ibrahim from Kebbi State, Nigeria. Bernard from Burkina Faso. It's good to have you here. Welcome, Albert. It's good to have you here. Ibrahim is saying that he's looking to learn access to markets and funding opportunities. We're sure that you will learn that today. Thank you so much. Welcome, Jeffrey. Welcome, Emmanuel from Lagos. Welcome, Dr. Abubakar from Gombe State, Nigeria. We're so happy to have you here. Syrian is saying that he's looking to learn how to finance this project. Welcome, Syria. Welcome, Evans. Partnership and sharing of opportunities. Thank you very much, Peter. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for sharing what you're looking to take away from this session. So now we are going into the meat of this webinar, and our session facilitator, Adenike Adeyemi, and she's the Executive Director of Faith Foundation. Adenike is a social innovator with 22 years of experience developing, funding and implementing large-scale social impact programs. As the Executive Director of Faith Foundation, she has expanded Faith Foundation's programs to over 1 million entrepreneurs across Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. Under her leadership, the foundation has raised over $10 million in partnerships with international organizations such as Meta, City Foundation, Kingdom of Netherlands, Standard Chartered Foundation, and Innovators, and she has disbursed over $2 million in grants and low interest loans to entrepreneurs. In 2020, she oversaw the disbursement of a $1 million COVID-19 support fund, and she has driven Faith Foundation's financial sustainability to achieve a 485% income growth. Join me to welcome Adenike as she takes the stage to teach us on how to secure financing for supporting innovators within academic ecosystems. Thank you very much. And over to you, Adenike.
Thank you very much, Ayomide and the ICT team. And good morning, or rather good afternoon from Lagos, Nigeria. I am happy to facilitate this session and conversations on innovation to impact strategies for securing funding for entrepreneurs and innovators within the academic ecosystem. I will be sharing my slides, which you will be able to get from the ICT team. Ayomide, please confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So again, I have been invited to spend the next 80 minutes or about 60 to 70 minutes to have a conversation with you all on strategies for securing funding for entrepreneurs and innovators within academic ecosystems. And I sort of put a byline to that how do we empower higher education institutions to drive innovation and sustainability. At the end of our conversation, I hope that you will have an improved appreciation on how you can source for funding to support the work you do with respect to innovation and entrepreneurship development within your different institutions, and also have an improved appreciation of how to develop and find external funding mechanisms that can help to ensure sustainability of your different entrepreneurship and innovation programs and initiatives. I want to start by saying that what I'm sharing with you here is my own experience. Not just in faith. I've been in faith for about 10 years now. But also before faith, I did a lot of work around sustainability. I was working as a consultant in KPMG then, spent about 8 years there. And then before faith, I also helped the startup. I led a startup nonprofit called the Nigeria Leadership Initiative. So my work over the last 2+ decades really has been around how do you design programs that are at scale, but then how do you also find the partners that can work with you to support, to develop, to finance those programs? I am aware that quite a number of us on this call are from academic institutions, and so perhaps your structures may be slightly different, but I would reflect that as we go on, because I do know that some institutions, some innovation and entrepreneurship programs within some HEIs are separately registered, while some sort of are subsumed under those departments. And so when we get to the Q&A, I'll be happy to take whatever questions I can take regarding your specific operating model and structure. But as best as I can, what I have done is sort of, being able to say, okay, let's speak across board. For those who it's the university mechanisms directly themselves, for those who they've created special rollout institutions under the university, or for those under the higher education, rather, institution, or for those who these run as units or departments or special project offices within your individual higher education institutions. The way I have structured today's conversations is along the 4 segments. One of the things I have learned, and one of the things as a team we have and we continue to learn, is that you can't start talking about funding and funding sustainability without understanding your business model as an HEI, looking at innovation and entrepreneurship, And without understanding what your business model is or what it can be or what it needs to be. And so I'm going to start with understanding that. The great thing, though, is that all of us here are teaching people to innovate, are teaching people to build solutions and to build viable solutions that have profitable structures to them or sustainable structures. So I'm going to start with, like teacher, teach thyself, because we also, in our own approach to running sustainable programs and initiatives, have to understand what we're also teaching our the different innovators in our entrepreneurship ecosystems to do. So I'll start with that. The second thing is we'll then spend some time understanding, how do you define and map your financing needs in line with your strategic goals? So how do you define your financing need in line with your strategic goals? The third is we will talk about how do you explore diverse funding options? What are the different funding options that are available to date? And then what are some of the innovative financing opportunities, particularly within the entrepreneurship ecosystem, that you can take advantage of? And then last but not the least, we'll talk about how to sustain and secure funding for long-term impact. I can see that there are one or two people that may not be able to see my screen. So can I just have a thumbs up? If you can see my screen, just a thumbs up. Fantastic. So if you cannot see my screen, perhaps it's your internet connection. So you may want to sign out and sign in again. Thank you to all those who are thumbs up. I also see that there may be one or two people who require French interpretation, which is available on the call. And so perhaps the ICT team, I think they're already doing that, can put within the box how to access that. Thank you very much. I can see that that is already happening. Fantastic. So I'm going to start with first, understanding and defining your business model. The great thing about the work that we all do, all of us here, Faith Foundation, ICT, and all yourselves as HEIs, the great thing about the work we all do is that we're working to support and expand critical aspects of the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And so for us, and for me in particular, the first baseline I always start to ask is, what is your business model as an organization? I know that because a lot of us teach business model canvas or use the business model canvas framework to teach or to support entrepreneurship and innovation, it is not new to us. But I'm not also going to assume that everybody understands what a business model is. I'm going to start with explaining what it is, but with respect to this conversation. About 8 years ago, this was something we started to do at Faith, to say that we're a nonprofit. So Faith Foundation is a nonprofit organization. We're a 25-year-old nonprofit organization that supports people in innovation and entrepreneurship through financial and non-financial services. And about 8 years ago, we also said we needed to develop our business model. And we actually used the business model canvas because we felt that it was important to understand how our programming led to how our strategy led to our programming, and how our strategy helped us in reaching our path to sustainability. As with some of you, we were significantly dependent on grants. We still have grant dependency, but not to the extent that we do or we had it before. And so when you think about your business model, you have to ask yourself, for African higher educational institutions, whether universities, colleges, however way you're structured, you need to sit down. One thing you need to do from this conversation is go away with your team and map out what your business model is. You have to sit down and say, every program we design, we deliver, we report on, or we are planning to design, deliver, and report on, how do we capture the value that can then finance and sustain the work? Is there even value to be captured? What is that value? If there's value to be captured, who will appreciate that value? Who has appreciated that value to date? Do they still appreciate that value? Or the value appreciation is changing? And when I say this, I will, if you even reflect on the way the entrepreneurship ecosystem has changed, and I will speak using Nigeria as an example. And so Nigeria, when we started 25 years ago, and the entrepreneurship landscape was very, very different. 25 years ago, universities in Nigeria were not teaching entrepreneurship. Higher institutions were not talking about entrepreneurship at all. In fact, if anything, a lot of the focus was, making sure that people got skills and knowledge that could then make them work and be employers of labor, not be creators of labor themselves. And so when we came in, and for any other person that came in at that time, the value was very distinct, unique, and different. And we linked the value at Fate to job creation. It is still the same now, 25 years after, but as you all would know, the ecosystem has significantly evolved. In some of our countries, the entrepreneurship ecosystem is even significantly more matured than some others. But there is no, it's obvious that there's a strong appreciation now of how entrepreneurship is a continuous driver of innovation, of social economic impact, and also job creation. The challenge, though, is that you and I are not the only ones in the space, and that is a great thing. I think it's a great thing. I think that there needs to be much HEIs in the space and nonprofits and social sector organizations doing the work we do. But the point I'm trying to make is that the way we defined our value then and defining it now has changed. And the type of people who were interested then and now has changed. In some cases, when the type of people are still the same, the way we talk about, the work we did then and now has also changed. And so it's very important to realize, how the ecosystem you are has changed and is changing. And what then does that mean about how you describe and articulate the value you give as an HEI in a way that you'll be able to attract entrepreneurs, but also attract some funders and supporters to your work? So, yes. So the next thing I want to then go into, because I don't want to assume that all of our HEIs are structured the same way. Again, I'm sure this is familiar to all of you. But I thought it was important to then talk about the different business models and how they are changing. So, for instance, these are the traditional business models that we're all familiar with. Some of you are in HEIs that are purely for profit, right? And some of you are in HEIs that are purely non-profit, right? And so one of the questions you need to ask yourself is that, where do we sit in this continuum from a traditionally non-profit HEI to a traditionally for-profit HEI, And where do you see your business model changing and evolving into? So I will give you an example. When we were founded in the year 2000, we were a traditional nonprofit business model structure. This is where we are right now, where we're still a nonprofit, but a certain part of our funding now includes revenues and income earned from revenues and from fees. But it is also looking like very soon we're going to be even a bit more here, or at least some part of our programming and structure will be here. If you don't understand where you are and where you're transitioning to, you will be attracting and reaching out to the wrong types of funding and funders. And by the way, a lot of funders also want to know what your business model structure is. 2 years ago, there was a potential funder that we had, an intensive conversation with. And they said that they only gave funding, if they gave funding to institutions like us, they wanted to give funding where it was a for-profit with a strong social responsibility aspect of it. But because it wasn't aligned with us, we ended up stepping away from that conversation because we saw that our alignment from what they wanted to fund and how we receive funding was different. And so you need to understand where your business model is as an HEI and where it may be positioned to be or moving to, or where there may even be opportunities for you. In some cases, some of you are going to have to engage with your higher institutions, maybe like your Office of Development or your fundraising office within your HEI. And it's important for you to be able to say that, well, the HEI itself may be let me give an example, a traditional business structure. But for our innovation or entrepreneurship program, we may require to be traditional nonprofit for the first 1 to 2 years. And then by year 3 to year 5, it may then be end phase. I hope you understand why I'm really spending some time here. But again, like I said, it's important to be able to, ensure that you understand where you are. Now, this next slide is, a number of us are probably very aware of the business model canvas. And the one thing that we also then did was to be able to make sure that we clearly defined our business model. And so, for example, at Faith Foundation, we did the exercise of printing out a business model canvas and then saying, what's our value proposition as an organization? What is our offer? Who are the customer segments we target, both for direct beneficiaries and the funders? How do we build relationships with them? How do they hear about us? And how are we investing in the channels to hear about us? Who do we require in terms of partners? What are the key activities we need to do? And what are the resources we need to do them? What is our cost model, in terms of what do we invest on? For some of you, you would require significant infrastructural cost structures, whether in terms of space, in terms of technology. Some of you may even be in specialized sectors where you require like equipment and the like. Or some of you, it's people resources that you then require. So what does that mean to you? So that's one of the things. And then we then said, what are our revenue streams? What have our revenue streams been to date? What are the ones we've not tapped well into? What are the ones that we need to tap? So I'm strongly encouraging you that spend the next few weeks with yourselves and your teams to map out your business model for your HEI and with respect to your entrepreneurship and innovation focus. and then use that to have a conversation with your key and your core team members to define it. It really, really helps really identify where challenges and opportunities are. So just to round up on this, make sure that you are clear on the business model that aligns with your mission and your operating model. Some of you, because of your operating model, may not be able to do a fully nonprofit or a fully for-profit just because of how you're structured. I do know that that's why some HEIs I know went to roll out and set up special innovation hubs or accelerators hubs or entrepreneurship centers, because they needed to register it separately from the organization and define it in a different way. Understand where you are, where you can be, and what is then important to you. Now, the other reason why, and I talk about this at the end, the other reason why it's very, very important to be clear about your business model, and I'll say this again later, is that the funding landscape is changing significantly. It is changing significantly. A number of you have been following sort of like the changes that have been led by the US aid organization. Now, do you know that I'm sure you probably know, so I'm preaching to the choir here, but a lot of universities and colleges in the United States are impacted by the evolving US landscape, because quite a number of them receive government funding for research. They receive government funding for innovation work like this. I do know quite a number of HEIs that focus on innovation and entrepreneurship in the US that receive funding from state governments and from federal government, from the Department of Education and the like. And so they're challenged. Now, I do know one or two institutions that are doing the kind of work you do, that the recent review of USAID is also impacting their work. And by the way, we also see that some countries are reducing their aid budget. So for instance, the UK aid has downward reviewed the percentage of funds they give to aid and deploying that to security or defense. We've seen comments from like the Dutch government and from a few others. Now more than ever, it's important to look at where your funding is coming from, the changing landscape, and what the opportunities are. And we'll go into that in more detail. I also want to emphasize that I will take questions at the end. I have seen some questions and I will take it at the end. So once you've clarified what your business model is, the next step is then to define your financing needs as an HEI. And so in your financing needs, you want to think of two things. You want to first of all say, what is your strategy? And so I hope, you all have, or you're all working to develop like a long-term strategy. So for instance, at Fate, we're currently working on a 5-year strategy that runs between 2024 to 2029. And that helps us in our long-term planning. We're clear on where we want to be in 2029. We're clear on the goals we want to achieve in 2029. But that goal is very well defined on the kind of programs we want to do, the type of people that we need in terms of people capacity to deliver on that, the type of infrastructure. And infrastructure here, to also emphasize, is not just infrastructure in terms of brick and mortar, but a lot of our infrastructure costs for us in the next 3 to 5 years are technology-related costs, both hard and soft equipment to deliver on technology, because technology is core to our growth. Quite a lot of us want to be agile with data, with artificial intelligence and machine learning, but they require significant cost. And then also on operational needs. Some of us are hubs and centers where we have locations, different locations in terms of what we want to do. So you need to be clear about what you are financing for and which ones are immediate financing needs, which ones can wait for the next 1 year, which ones are 2 years, which ones are multi-year financing requirements. And then you then develop a budget. So the second task I'm going to give you all, if you don't have it already, is that once you've done your business model, make sure you're clear about your long-term strategy, and then you have an indicative budget for it. I can tell you for a fact that it's been of significant help for us to be able to say that, oh, between now and 2029, this is what our budget would look like as an organization. And it's important to have it. Now, does that mean the budget will not change? No. We are in a highly inflationary environment. For the Nigerians that are here with me on the call, we've seen inflationary pressures between 30% to about 40+% in some cases. So we've done a situation where we review our budget every quarter, and then we readjust for inflationary pressures as required. But at least it gives us that. The other reason that we do that is because our approach has gradually moved from having short-term funding to now looking at much more long-term funding options. And so to that extent, we want to work on projects that are 1 to 3 years or more in nature. And I'm sure a lot of you would agree with me. It is a challenge to try to get funding for small projects. I mean, some require, when I say challenge, it's probably easier to get, but it can put a lot of pressure on the organization, on your institution, on people, on planning, where every 6 months you're working on a new project or a new partner or a new funding. And so some of our best projects in the last 1 to 2 years are programs that have a 1 to 3 year or more landscape. For instance, there's a 5-year program that we're running. And because we're clear on what we want to achieve in 5 years, and we also have a partnership for that, we know what funding is available, we know the funding that's not available, and it's easier for us to call in partners to say, oh, we have 75% of funding for this for 5 years, come and join us to contribute to the next 25 years. All I'm trying to say is that it's important that you define your goals and also the funding that's required. And I've sort of detailed the focus areas that you can in terms of what types of programming are you going to do? Is it training? Is it mentoring? Is it consulting support? Are you going to have, for instance, a maker space or a production center? Are you going to support the entrepreneurs with funding? So maybe you provide financial services. What are the operational considerations that you would have? And the other one thing I want to talk about in terms of operational considerations, I talk about this a lot in a separate class I take around financial management, is that it is important when you are doing your budget to do a time-based budget for your staffing. Know how many people you're going to need, the volume of time you would require for them, for your specific projects, but also let's be careful not to quickly put our people in overhead costs, because for quite a lot, let me give an example for Faith Foundation. 70% of the people who are employed by Faith Foundation are people who deliver programs, whether design programs, managing programs, doing monitoring, evaluation, and reporting on programs. So we don't cost them as overheads because they're critical to program delivery. It's not like our finance or HR or admin. So the point I'm trying to make here is that as you are defining your budgetary needs, be careful about quickly applying your staffing costs to overhead, because in a lot of cases, it's not overhead costs. Then the last area, obviously, you want to do is looking at growth and expansion, because the way we budgeted in 2000 when FATE started was different from how we budgeted a few years from then. Some of you may be testing programs and projects and pilot. Maybe you are supporting, let me say, maybe 50 entrepreneurs or young innovators. But in the next 3 years, you want to scale from 50 to 5,000. You know, you need to be able to build and map that scaling targets within your financial planning model. And then I think the last thing I want to talk about in terms of defining your fund is also know where you are in your growth phase. Just like a business, some of you are in idea stage, some of you have started as an HEI, some of you are in growth, some of you are in expansion, some of you are in maturity. We've been around for 25 years. We are in an expansion. We're in between expansion and maturity. Now, you can go back again. So I'll give you an example. 10 years ago, we were in a growth phase, but we then launched what we call our research and policy advocacy arm of the foundation. So while the foundation as a whole was in a growth phase, this new project we launched was then in an ideation phase. And so we had to treat that project as an ideation project, even though the organization itself was in a growth phase. So sometimes you can have the organization in a different phase from a particular project or program, depending on how it is. But why is understanding your growth phase important? It will help you know the type of funding and financing that you can seek. There's some funding that's available only for, there's some funding I see where they'll say, don't apply to this if your program or project is more than 3 years. But there's some other funding that will say, oh, we only test growth and expansion. We're not funding new programs or pilot projects. We only support projects and programs that are ready for scale. So know where your HEI is on this journey, and also know where the programs and or projects you're looking for is there. For those in maturity, you are then developing sustainable streams. And the good thing is that I'm sure maybe some of you as HEIs, your institutions already have endowment. We have had an endowment since we were funded, but we're now looking at the endowment to say that now that we're in an expansion phase, how do we optimize our endowment assets? For some of you, you may set up completely different revenue streams. I know HEIs that have set up aspects within their structures to generate revenues from it. So again, sometimes it's also understanding the sort of like the layered aspect of where you and the project is on a growth phase, and then focusing on the funding for that. Now, the third aspect, I'm sure some of you thought that this was what I will start with, but I do hope that you appreciate why I needed to sort of build to this point now. Because if you don't get your business model and your funding needs ready, you would not be able to now fully position yourself for that. So we're going to now talk about, securing funding and the like. So again, this first slide is probably not, a lot of what I will say here is not necessarily new, but I'm going to use a lot of examples around this. So what are the traditional funding options for you as an HEI? Everybody's aware of grants, and there are grants that fund specific programs or projects. In a lot of cases, grants usually go to particular initiatives. Depending on who you get the grants from, the reporting and the evaluation of it may be more or maybe less stringent. So when you are looking for grants from a multilateral organization, it's usually very stringent. So if you're looking for a grant from a UN agency, for instance, or like the African Development Bank, the process, if you're getting the grant directly, it's really can be very stringent, or World Bank or the like. If you're looking for a grant from a corporate foundation, it is rigorous, but not as rigorous as a multilateral organization. In some cases, if you're looking for grants from a corporate, from like one of this new, what we call like new corporate funders, they're usually more flexible in terms of the grant or reporting process. But again, you're aware of that. Number two, I do hope that you as HEIs are strongly leveraging on donations within and across your alumni community. I give an example. There's a university here in Nigeria, one of the universities that we have some good relationship with, where their innovation and entrepreneurship programs, some key programs and initiatives have been funded by alumni members who are doing particular things within that place. So you are very well positioned to dip in and to extract from your alumni community or from donor interactions and investors. Now, the third is through corporate sponsorships. And the corporate sponsorship is different from a grant because usually the sponsor will say, oh, we want you to come and we want to sponsor something that is in line with our product or service as a corporate that then aligns with what we're doing. So in that situation, there's like mutual benefits from it. The challenge sometimes with corporate sponsorships is that they're not sustainable. Oftentimes, the corporate hat is then won because the person wants their brand all over the place, and it can overwhelm from your brand or from the purpose that you're doing. Sometimes also with corporate sponsorships, the corporate sponsor, because they want their brand all over this place, it can lead to a situation where they overwhelm the beneficiaries. So the beneficiaries for your program or project lose the spotlight because of that. So again, the fourth, which honestly, most of you should be doing, is earned income. Like I mentioned, we moved to earned income, and it's brought in some revenue and funding for us. There is no reason why, and the way I always explain it is that when you think of earned income, the first place to start is, what are you doing very well that you can commercialize and monetize? And so for those of you who are based in Nigeria, we have, over the last, like I said, we're around for a bit. And so we have books that we sell, and they're books on entrepreneurship. We have courses that we sell. We have research reports and data that we sell. Sometimes, occasionally, when we have like free space use, people come and rent our space for use. The amount we charge is not commercial rates for any of the things that we earn revenue from. But because it's not commercial rate, that even makes it more attractive to people. And so, but then it comes to us as revenue to continue to support what we've done. So sometimes the revenues that we make from books and courses and projects have then allowed us to fund new initiatives that we did not get grants for before. So again, think of the opportunities you have in generating revenue through the things that you do. And then last but not the least is, I'm sure some of us as HEIs, there may be partnerships we may have with our government, either our national government or our state government, and in some cases like development institutions who then fund them. So again, this is like traditional funding options. Now, the next slide, this next phase then talks about what we have seen as how the funding space is changing with respect to these traditional funding areas that I spoke about. So the first is that for a lot of grants, and for those of you who were here from the beginning, you would remember that I said that the donor space has changed significantly and is going to continue to change significantly over the years. So one of the things that donors are asking, and by the way, remember that you as an HEI, you're in the entrepreneurship space with incubators and accelerators. And a lot of those incubators and accelerators have for-profit structures to them. So in some situations, there's some competition there, but I'll also talk about why we don't also need to compete with them, but collaborate with them. And because a lot of people who are funding entrepreneurship now are saying, what is the impact of our work? What we're now seeing is a shift from just giving grants to fund program outcomes, but for grants that are impact linked. So before, a donor will say, we'll give you a fund to train 1,000 young people for entrepreneurship or to help them improve their innovation potential. Now, what we're seeing is that grants providers will say, we'll give you grants that are linked to job creation. So yes, as part of your program delivery, you will train them, you will mentor them, but we want to make sure that this grant is for the creation of 1,000 jobs for young people, right? So it's important for you to recognize her. A lot of those are like impact funding work because it's not just for program implementation, it is for program. A lot of that work is not just for program implementation, but from program delivery of that work and outcome, and more importantly, impact. The other thing that we're also seeing is that a number of funders are also saying that, and I saw that from, I never saw it before until about maybe 2 years ago. So what we're then seeing is that some of the funds will say, we'll give you 50%, we'll give you 50% to implement the program, but if you're able to achieve this impact, we will then give you the additional 50%. So that's one of the ways. The third, but not the least from grants, and this one we had with a partner for about 5 years, where it was crowdfunding, where the partner will say, I would give you half of this cost, but I would only give you if you can successfully raise an additional, the 50% of that. So it's like a matching fund for that. In some cases, they would say, okay, go and crowdfund, use the internet to go and crowdfund. If you can get up to this amount, we will match it. Now, the second thing that we're seeing in terms of individual donations, it's what is called donor advised funds. So donor advised funds are, so I'll give an example. An example of donor advised funds is like Rockefeller Philanthropy, right? So Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. So some of us know Rockefeller Foundation. And Rockefeller Foundation is separate, but then you then have Rockefeller Donor Advisory. So I would encourage you to also look out for donor advised funds like the one that I have mentioned. And so the way a donor advised fund is structured, is that people will come and say, so for instance, me as Adenike, I would say that I have maybe $10 million, but I don't want to deploy that $10 million myself. I am going to give that $10 million to a donor advisor who will then determine where that funding should go. And we're seeing an increase. I've seen at least 3, and I've given one example. I've seen at least 3 that have come up recently. So unlike before, where Adenike will say, oh, let me, for instance, look for an HEI in Kenya to invest in, I'm going to look for a donor advice fund. So as you're researching on your funding and financing and potential funding partners, look for donor advice funds who are the ones that collate funding from donors, from HNIs. HNIs are high net worth individuals, and who are then the ones that then deliver that. The third is, again, still corporate sponsorships. But what we're seeing that is changing is that because a lot of corporates are now CSR minded or corporate impact minded, what they're then saying is that, oh, we as this bank, we're focusing on, let me say, the agricultural value chain, because a lot of the financing we give is on agricultural value chain. Let's enter a corporate partnership with you where you would also focus on programs and initiatives in the agricultural value chain with that. The fourth is what I've talked about, where, you know, a lot of funding is now with a social enterprise lens for you, where you are saying, oh, we'll give a fund to an entrepreneur, but that fund is not a grant. It is, we're going to give an equivalent of 1 million naira, and in 1 or 2 years, the entrepreneur gives us that 1 million naira back with an additional interest and account for that, you know, or some particular mechanisms that derive with that. Last but not the least is what I'm seeing in the development space and the development community, where particularly because of climate change and because of the funding that's because of what we're seeing around green bonds, around social impact bonds, people are investing in organizations like ours, where using like impact bonds forms and measures. Again, a financial advisor can help you on how to approach that. The last but not the least that I want to speak about in terms of securing funding, in addition to the other opportunities that I've mentioned, is how do you also better get funding within the entrepreneurship ecosystem? Now, I do know some of us are hubs ourselves. I do know some of us have incubators or accelerators ourselves. But one thing that I will definitely recommend is that, can you as an HEI try not to do it alone? You are better off partnering with an existing hub, an existing nonprofit or private sector accelerator. And so you bring in your might as an HEI, your name and your brand, and you say, okay, let's identify this hub and we will partner with them. And by the way, that our partnership is, you know, a triple helix model where you are bringing your strength as academia, they're bringing their market knowledge, and you jointly seek for funding. I can bet you that larger funds are probably more excited to fund both of you as partners together than individually, because they know that this hub or accelerator will bring some private sector thinking to you, but you bring some stability, structure, academic might into that partnership. So if you're not already thinking about it as an HEI, think of how you can work with existing hubs, or hubs around you to partner with them and seek for funding. In fact, if you see a large grant, if you see a grant that is $200,000, $300,000 or more, try not to do it alone. Try to look for other hubs to partner and roll that out with. There's so much that you can build into that project or program that is shared knowledge, shared information, partnership for scale. And a partner would look at that, because I can tell you that a lot of the funds we've applied for recently have encouraged partnerships, have encouraged joint funding, particularly the large ones. So that's number one. Number two is that you as an HEI can pitch your innovation and entrepreneurship idea to investors to invest in you because you are investing in the next potential people that they will provide funding and support for, right? And so, and 2 and 3 sort of go hand in hand, because what you're then doing is that you're saying, oh, part of the way I can get funding is to part of the way I can get funding is to make sure that I provide technical assistance to high growth startups or to startups in particular spaces, so that I make your work as an angel investor or as a venture capital provider easier. So instead of you seeing 200 startups, I can come to you with 10 very good ones that align with your funding focus, your interest, and everything. So please, please, and please think of doing the same things that your entrepreneurs or innovations do, but more from a technical assistant or capacity point of view. You can also compete for grants. You can compete for equity funding, also with funds that are targeted at entrepreneurs, because guess what? You are putting on an innovator hat. You're building innovation ecosystems, and there's nothing stopping you also from also competing for grants. The fourth thing I would say is that you as an academic institution, a lot of you, almost all you HEIs, you have faculty of whether education, law, health, engineering, social sciences, arts, and all the like. You as an HEI can individually reach out to corporates within your sector and space to say that we want to partner with you. So instead of, what we see as the typical corporate partnerships, you are saying that you want to partner with those corporates to identify new innovations within their value chain that can help to solve the problem that they have. So I'll give you an example, and this was something we tried a few years ago. There was a partner that was doing some work. In fact, 2 partners. One was doing a product that required a lot of water, but they were trying to also build sustainability within their value chain. Another was somebody that was doing something in the dairy industry. And one of the conversations we had was that, we bring entrepreneurs together in the sector that you're looking to work with. If you support us, we can find entrepreneurs that can help you solve a problem. So in one of those cases, it was finding an entrepreneur that helped to solve a problem on aggregating smallholder farmers within the dairy value chain for that corporate. So you understand what I'm saying? You're helping the corporate to solve a problem they have in their value chain. You are creating value. Going back again to my initial comment around what is the value proposition that you're, articulating for. And they then said, okay, we'll give some money towards that. So again, rethinking innovation, but making sure that the way you are rethinking innovation is not just connecting them with innovators, but saying that, oh, we can create a channel to identify your problem and create a pipeline or continued pipeline for addressing your issues. And then obviously the typical grants and subsidies. So in rounding up, right, in securing and keeping funding, your financial plan must be clear. You can't seek sustainable funding without having a minimum of a 1 to 3 year strategy plan. And yes, the strategy plan can change. It does change. You can review it every year, but it helps to have in place because it speaks to whoever funding you are speaking to, that you're strategic, you're long-term thinking, you're visionary in your thinking. But your strategic plan must then have a financial plan. One of the things people complain about HEIs a lot is that you don't have private sector thinking. And there's a lot of focus around intangible things. But at the end of the day, if somebody is funding you, they're asking what is the return on investment on this fund. And so you need to be more financially intelligent as HEIs. In fact, if there's one thing ICT can do for you, is also maybe organize programs around improving your financial intelligence or better preparing you to be better financial managers. And I'm saying this because of comments I've heard about, higher institutions, particularly higher institutions in our continent. In fact, some funders, when they're funding you, they'll say, if I give you $1, what is that return on $1 in grants? If I give you $10, what is that? You as an HEI must know that if I'm running this type of program, it's going to cost me $1 per entrepreneur, per person, and this is the impact that I'll get. That's how financially intelligent and articulate you should be. So yes, we are academic institutions, but we need to put on that business model, private sector thinking hat in understanding what it actually costs to run a program and the expectation of the impact, because a lot of the new funders are asking that. And by the way, as you can tell in what I mentioned earlier on, for a lot of us that receive funding from bilateral funding, so you're receiving funding from an aid fund from a country that is maybe outside of the African continent, their taxpayers are also asking them, for every 1 million that goes into this fund, what is the return on that? So you must be financially intelligent, you must improve your financial literacy, and you must have a clear view of your plan and what you're doing, and you must monitor and manage your cash flow. You must make sure that there's somebody. The other thing that we don't fully appreciate is just the financial capacity required to bookkeep on funds and also to report on funds. Lately, in the last 5 years, I don't think that there's any major donor that we've had that has not asked us for the CVs of our financial managers. In fact, I think the last 2 to 3 large major funds we got, they want to know, who is your financial team? Who is your head of finance? What is their skills and competencies? They've asked us for our financial and accounting policies, right? They have asked us around who on the board is responsible for overseeing financial management. And they have asked us for our audited financial accounts. Now, I know it may be a bit complicated with some of you, because again of how you're structured. If you're an HEI, you're structured in a larger university, you're a sub-project unit and the like. You need to find a way to make sure that you improve on your bookkeeping and financial reporting, regardless of the complexities that you have. There's some funds you may not be able to get if you don't do audits. I mean, we do audits every year. We still did our most recent audit for 2024 financial year, which we've approved. And I know that part of the reasons why some funders have and continue to come to us is even that audit part. So your bookkeeping, your accounting management, your transparency, your reporting is important. Now, some of you may not be able to set up a board of directors, but perhaps maybe have an advisory board of some sort, because they want to know that you are accountable for the funds that come to you. You are accountable for the funds that come to you. So make sure that there is governance and you can show evidence of your governance, of your not just your program reporting, because a lot of us, and I would say again for HEIs, we're very good around data, insights, impact reporting, but we cannot be lax around financial reporting. And then if they're compliant, in Nigeria, for instance, you all have to be compliant with the Special Control Unit on Anti-Money Laundering, because even for HEIs, they want to be sure that you're not receiving funding for like terrorist financing and the like. Because there's some funds that will, they don't want to make sure, they don't want to have any issues that have come with the funding and everything. Then when you get a fund, even if it's a small fund, even if it's $5,000 funds, you know how we say, he who is faithful in little will show that they are faithful in a lot. Our journey over the years is because we've been able to show ability to be accountable for $1,000 funding, which then moved us to $5,000 funding, which then moved us to $10,000 funding, 20,000, and then more. And no matter how small the size of the funding, you'll make sure that your reporting is prompt. You cannot, one thing that donors don't like is that you get funding, you forget when you're supposed to be reporting, you report late, and when you're reporting late, you don't even let them know that you're going to report late because you're not keeping on track with it. I know it can be very hard. Reporting takes a lot of time. We had to add an additional person to our fund accounting function just because project financial reporting takes a lot of time. And that's why I'm also saying that when you're doing your budgeting, you have to make sure that you account for the time required also in reporting very well. And so we try to make sure that, it's sometimes we also falter. But what I always say is that if there are issues, make sure that the funder does not ask you. If you are going to be late in reporting for anything, you should be proactive and let them know, oh, by the way, we're supposed to report on the 1st, but we're having issues with our reconciliation. Please, can you give us till so and so date? Number 2, make sure that you share updates around your work when you receive funding, or as you're receiving funding, or before you receive funding, even without being asked to do that. Invite your donors or prospective donors or current donors to your program. Let them meet with your beneficiaries. A lot of you that are supporting entrepreneurs, your donors should not really be meeting with you. They should be meeting with the entrepreneurs you are supporting. They should be going to their businesses. They should be seeing the innovations that they've done. They should be interacting with the innovation that's done. If for any reason you have to spend money a bit differently from what you budgeted for, make sure you escalate to your donor partner. Make sure you seek for approval and make sure you get them to understand why that is. Because sometimes the ability not to secure funds is because we've been giving funds and we didn't deploy it very well. So to my last slide, as I round up, my last thing is around this closeout point. The donor funding landscape for our work is evolving, and you need to understand how it's evolving. You need to know who may no longer be funding, but you need to know who may be funding. And I've shared quite a number of examples around the way the funding is. But also make sure that you are abreast with geopolitics. So for instance, if you are receiving US funding, you already know that there may be challenge with you getting US funding. And you're saying, okay, where is funding evolving? So for instance, people are now saying that the UAE is now a place where they are funding a bit more. Some people will say, oh, China is funding a bit more. I leave that to you to determine. But just be aware of the evolving funding and donor landscape. Also be aware of the trends in your ecosystem and be aware of the changing. So when FAITH started, for instance, funders would fund people doing training on entrepreneurship. And a lot of initial funding we got was focused on training. Now, a lot of funding we get is not focused on training. So even we don't use the term training, even though training is one but many parts of the world work we do. So why am I saying that? You need to understand where funding is going to. Some funders are saying, we're not going to fund incubation. We're going to fund policy advocacy in entrepreneurship and innovation. Some funders will say, we're not going to fund training programs. We're going to fund programs that provide direct financial support through grants, through loans. Some funders are changing completely. There's a funder that used to fund us for training, pre-incubation training. And now what they're funding is AI capacity development for entrepreneurs. You get my point. I hope you get my point. Make sure you understand the changing ecosystem, where follow the money, and make sure you're adapting to do that. Beware of single donor reliance. It's not a disadvantage, but what happens when you are strongly reliant on a particular donor? Always think in your mind that something may happen and this donor may stop, or they may have an issue. What do you then do then? If you're not deploying technology for your scale, you're going to have a challenge. So we moved from supporting a few hundreds. In fact, we moved from supporting less than 100 entrepreneurs in a year to a few hundreds to 1,000, and now we're supporting multiple thousands a year through low-touch means, right? Through self-paced means. And technology is helping us to attract, technology is helping us to deploy those programs, is helping us to scale those programs, is helping us to check the data and report on those programs. So make sure that your eyes are on how can you use technology efficiently to scale, so that you're spending more, even though your reach is expanding, the spend per person is not also expanding in quantum leaps like that. Number 5 is identify what you can monetize. What can you sell? What can you charge for a fee? What product can you develop that adds income revenue generation to you? Also, like I mentioned in the other example, work collaboratively with other people. You as HEIs must partner with BDSPs, must partner with incubation and hubs. I feel that there's more potential for scale and funding when you do that. And then last but not the least, like I've said a lot of times, know when to evolve your funding model. There was a time that even for us, we know that the traditional forms of grants making is significantly reducing. People are looking more towards impact funding. And so a lot of our funding model is evolving to that. So know when to evolve your funding model. Make sure that you understand the changing landscape. So thank you for listening to me. I am going to then move to questions and answers. Thank you. Ayomide, I don't know how you want us to take the question and answers, but I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adenike. It was a very insightful session, and I learned a lot from HEIs defining their business model to partnering with incubators and accelerators. It was very, very insightful. And we already have some questions here that I'm just going to read out. This person said, what are the business model for African universities and mechanisms to bring investors on board for funding? We can't hear you now. I think you're muted.
Yeah, I was on mute, yes. So again, let me go back to, I don't know if that person asked that. I think that question was asked before I started talking about the business model. So the way your business model and your funding model is, it depends on the way you are structured. Some of us are HEIs that are for-profit. Some of us are HEIs that are non-profits. So you need to first of all understand where you fit in terms of the business model structure. That's number 1. Number 2, understand where is your current source of funding in line with your program budget and what you do, right? What is going to change? And then what do you need? How much money do you then need to fill that gap? And what are the sources for filling that gap? But this is where it starts. You need to, first of all, really understand what your business model structure is, and then deploy, like I mentioned, the different funding options that are available for you to then deploy.
Thank you very much for that. Please drop your questions in the chat box and we'll take them. This person is saying that some of the challenges need to be solved. In Ethiopia, higher education institutions, there are infrastructure limitations, access to capital, socioeconomic and cultural barriers. Is there any suggestions on how to solve this as an HEI?
Yes. Again, fantastic question. So we need to wear the hat that we tell our entrepreneurs or the students that we're trying to teach on entrepreneurship. We need to wear that hat we need to wear that hat in solving those problems. I totally agree with you. The challenge is very wide. The funding is not a lot, but the need is there and evident. The HEIs that I know that have been able to attract and sustain fundings are the ones that start to think as a business. So there are infrastructural limitations, but you have a space, right? Can you rent that space? That's number one. Number two, can you provide consulting support for people who are looking to invest in the space? Number three, which I think I should have even mentioned as a whole, let me give you an example of Faith Foundation. Faith Foundation, in the last 10 years, has stepped in the gap that HEIs did not fill. What is that gap? Research and data on the entrepreneurship ecosystem. So for 25 years, we've been teaching and supporting people to start businesses. But in the last 10 years, we have been able to develop data and insight on the entrepreneurship ecosystem. What has that done for us? Number one, it significantly increased our value proposition because we will tell you that the programs we deploy are research and evidence-based. And by the way, a lot of the data that we use for our entrepreneurship reports, which I will be happy to share, is not just data. Only 10% of that data comes from the entrepreneurs we support. Over 90% of that data is from the entrepreneurship ecosystem and entrepreneurs we don't support. And so two of our major funders to date, Ayomide knows this. I think Ayomide knows this. They came to us because they wanted to get insights on the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Nigeria. And so you as an HEI, what is your data? How are you mining the data that you as an academic institution have? How are you creating insights that investors, that funders need? So when some of these partners came to us, it was to discuss our research. In fact, most people that come to us now is to say, oh, you have this data and insight on the entrepreneurship ecosystem, share that with us. And then in sharing that with us, they then say that, oh, you have insights, but you also do the work. Can we work and partner with you? So that's the number one thing that I would say. You cannot be an educational academic institution where you're not generating data and insights on the innovation and entrepreneurship space. The gap is still there and it's very wide because you can collect that data at national level, you can collect it at state level, local government level, you can disaggregate it by gender, you can disaggregate it by age, you can disaggregate it by sector, you can disaggregate it by value chain. And you can then say that, once we then showcase that, we would share this data. So a lot of the data we share for free, but some of that data, people pay us to then deep dive into that. So if there's another takeaway you have from here, is to say your value as an educational institution is to be able to have access to data and is your potential research capability. So how are you mining your data? How are you developing data sets? How are you sharing that insights? And what are the opportunities that that can have for visibility, for partnerships, for funding, for distinguishing yourself in terms of the work that you do?
Thank you very much for that, Adenike. That was very, very insightful. About three people are asking if there, if you could share websites of foundations or funders that support HEIs and entrepreneurs within these HEIs. And
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So I will share like 2 to 3 blocks of funder types for you to think about. I can't share websites now because I don't know the website of Fed. The first will be bilateral organizations. So bilateral and aid organizations are people that provide funding through their country's sources. We've talked about USAID, so they are not a potential source of funding. But I'm sure some of you have or know about GIZ. So GIZ is the German Development Corporation. And GIZ in the last, GIZ, and the ICT team can look up the links and share it with you. So let me backtrack because first of all, the suggestions I'm giving to you are people who are interested in young people who are interested in job creation, people who are interested in innovation, people who are interested in market creation opportunities, and people who are interested in entrepreneurship. So the first thing you want to ask yourself before starting to look for funders or websites or whatever is that what are the thematic areas that our work is focused on that people will be interested in? So youth, employment, entrepreneurship, innovation, market creation systems. If you disaggregate it further, it may be women, young women, persons with disabilities and the like. And so based on that, my responses will be along those lines. So number one, bilateral organizations. So bilateral organizations like GIZ in particular, GIZ is interested in young people, is interested in jobs, is interested in technology, is interested in innovation, and they'll particularly be interested in academia, like I said, triple helix model partnerships. So academia, private sector relationships. So definitely take your time, go and look at their websites and that. So that's number one. And then other organizations like maybe the Kingdom of Netherlands and the like who do similar things. Number two is to look at multilateral organizations. So the ICT, for instance, ICT Africa can maybe share insights around the Africa Development Bank and potential opportunities with that. EBRD, which is the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, have recently started to look into the African continent and also invest in that. And they're investing in entrepreneurship, young people, jobs, and the like. So they're another potential for that. So those are like bilateral and multilateral organizations. The second will be like foundations. So foundations that are corporate foundations that then fund a lot of those work. So the most major funder on the African continent now for youth, entrepreneurship, jobs, innovation, young people, females, persons with disabilities is the MasterCard Foundation. And so the MasterCard Foundation is, they fund either in Africa through their direct corporate office, or they fund in their different country offices. So go and look for the MasterCard Foundation. They have open calls. Sometimes in some situations, you may have to get the funding through somebody who has gotten funding with that. So look at that. Then you have like Standard Chartered Foundation, you have City Foundation. City Foundation just recently closed an open call on entrepreneurship and innovation and everything. JP Morgan Foundation. So look at a lot of all these large institutions and the like. The third is a lot of the technology companies are also, interested in that. So maybe like Google, Meta, Amazon, and all of those things, they're interested in funding. And some of them actually, like a Google has like research grants for tertiary institutions. Again, you need to go and you need to spend time to also do your research. The more you research, the more you sign up for certain things and alerts, the more things point your way. But I do know that, for instance, a lot of the large global tech companies, like I've mentioned, also look to supporting educational institutions. One thing you don't realize is that you as HEIs, in some situations, in a lot of situations, are even in a stronger capacity to seek for funding than like a regular nonprofit like ours because of your academic domain and expertise. So again, look at those large organizations. And then occasionally you then have some like large charities or something. So maybe like a data.org, maybe, sorry, I can't remember any other one like now that are then looking towards funding particular things. But those are the ones that I can speak right off the top of my head.
Thank you very much, Adenike. I'm sure that they have gotten the names of these organizations and will begin to reach out to them or find ways to apply for these opportunities. The last question that we have here is someone is asking that is it best to collaborate with different institutions or collaborate within the same HEI but with different faculties?
Can you say that again?
Okay, so the person wants to know if it's better to collaborate with different institutions, different HEIs, or it is better to collaborate within the same HEI but different faculties.
Yeah, so I think my answer to that will be, what are you collaborating on? Right? So it might be easier for us to say, oh, we have different innovation programs within one HEI that we can, collaborate together because there's a joint partnership with that. I'll give an example. There's a US university that I used to serve as a visiting lecturer for before, and it was for a program that was in collaboration with the business school, the Center for Innovation, and then the incubation program of the university. And so what they did was students from the business school were the only ones that were then going to be incubated because they then come with their incubation ideas and they're then incubated there. And then the Center for Innovation for the university then provided like extra support for mentoring, teachers, ecosystem aggregation, and the like. So that was within the same university, but different departments and programs within the university. So that's an option. Number two is the other example, which is then saying, oh, maybe the university or the higher institution itself then says, let me partner with Faith Foundation and ICT, for instance, to work on a joint project, because the work that we're trying to do is more sort of like market-facing work, and the target audience is not just designated to the students in the higher education. Again, either can work. So I don't think one or the other is better. The point is, what are you collaborating on? Defining the value proposition of the different entities that are collaborating, and why, what will be the sort of like value proposition to that type. What do each of you bring to the table, and how together your scale and impact can be maximized. Once you've done that, you then can decide. Some people may even decide that, oh, it's better for HEIs across different countries to collaborate for a joint project, because maybe the founder is looking to partner to fund something in Africa. So an HEI in Kenya can partner with an HEI in Nigeria because of the East and West African focus of the fund. So it depends.
Thank you very much, Adenike. That's all for the question and answer session. It's been a really insightful and it's been a really insightful session. And the comments we're having here says true to that. People are saying it was very insightful. They learned a lot. Very important. This is a highly insightful presentation. People are asking for the slides, very enriching presentation. So we really thank you for taking the time out today to talk about how HEIs can secure funding in Africa. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My slides are available. The ICT Africa team has my slides, and I've given them permission to share it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Please, in one word, can you tell us in the chat box? I know that some people have written how they really love the presentation, how they learned a lot, but in one word, just share in the key highlights for this presentation. What is that key highlights that you're taking home from everything that she has said? What is the key highlights that you're taking home? Is it from the collaboration to mapping, from the collaboration to partnering? And so please drop your comments in the chat box. J. Philip says empowering. Shukurat says information on funding sources. We are glad that you really got value for your time today. Thank you very much. And one, yes, Cindy says aligning your business model with your funding needs and sources. Thank you so much. Daniel says one will be able to think like a business. Then Jeffrey says HR should take lead in exploring funding opportunities. Thank you so much for sharing that. Then the next session we will round up in a bit, and the next session will be me inviting the head of the HR practice to talk to us about the next steps. Over to you, Abraham.
All right. Thanks, Ayomide. And once again, thank you all for your time. Ayomide, you can just put up the slide. I trust that we've had like an amazing session. I know Ayomide asked us to share our major takeaway. If you can maybe share in one word, like one word. Adenike said a whole lot of things, but in one word, just one word, how would you describe today's session? Just one word. One word. I know somebody already used the word interesting. It will be good to get our feedback as well. All right. Excellent. I see Manuel says excellent. Insightful. So insightful seems to be like the recurring word. Educative, perfect. Very good. Very good. We can keep the responses coming in. And at ICT Africa, especially the HEI practice, what we are looking to do, and just on brand with what Adenike has said, is that we do understand that there's a need to support HEIs to do more work, and each and every one of us in our space are doing an amazing work, either from research to commercializing research or innovation, just supporting the entrepreneurs that we have within our institution. And we want to do more as an organization, but we cannot do that without you, right? So we know that if we want to change the trajectory of Africa as people who are, cardinal in growth as it pertains to innovation and entrepreneurship, then there is a need for partnership. There's a need for co-creation. There's a need to do, more work and synergize the work that we do together. It's against that background that, we would be continually organizing webinars like this. For those that are probably just joining us, we've had, an extensive 3-day seminar before where we try to talk about research, try to talk about how you can improve your institution to be more positioned for innovation and entrepreneurship. And so we'll be in the course of the year and over, we will continue to try to support, particularly around capacity building. We believe that to be able to do great work, we need to be strengthened so that we can also strengthen the entrepreneurs within our institutions. We also are very strong on partnership. I've seen a couple of us ask question about, how do we get to join the WhatsApp group? First, I'd like to say, and I think Ayomide will talk about that in a minute, but I'd like to just state that if you're in this call, you're already a part of our community. The WhatsApp group is just more like, a place where you're able to access information quickly, and the link on, or the process on how you would be able to access that WhatsApp community will be shared with you. But beyond that, also, if for any reason there are ideas that you have or there are thoughts that you're looking to explore, feel free to reach out to us. To just sort of, if there are ideas you're looking at or things you're trying to collaborate on, feel free to reach out to us as an institution. But also, one of the things that this community also does is that it also allows you to collaborate with each other. So an HEI in Ghana, for instance, can collaborate with another HEI. In Ethiopia, the one in South Africa can collaborate with the one in Botswana. So this ecosystem is not limited to Nigeria or to Ghana, or to Kenya. It is one that is, tries to have different HEIs across the continent, and we definitely will be looking to engage each and every one of you. We also do have like research outputs that we will be publishing before the end of the year and convening. So be on the lookout as well for that. If you're looking for, to better understand how to engage, policy within your country, or you sort of have ideas around maybe deepening the ecosystem of HEIs, particularly within your country. So for instance, say in Ghana, you're looking to maybe create a collaborative that also supports other HEIs in Ghana, or have like a physical convening, please feel free as well to reach out to us. And then we also support with ideation and project implementation. So Adenike has said a lot about, the work that they do in terms of how it's important not just to receive grants or to come up with how we can make money, but the most important thing is the work that we do has to do with supporting the young people. So how exactly are we doing that, and how are we looking to also scale that work? I think I saw somebody made in the comments that they are looking to scale their project beyond the current funding that they are currently received from GIZ. So if you're looking to find out, how can we better scale, or perhaps looking at the more technical area around TTOs, feel free to reach out to us. Just in a nutshell, just to summarize again, the WhatsApp community will be shared with us. Also, because you are in this call, you're already a part of the HEI community. However, should you have, particular interest, things you want to explore, or particular programs, deepening capacity within your institution, or any of the things that, that we've shared before, feel free to reach out to us at heipractice@ict.africa. You already have the email. That's where you got the correspondence for this call from. But again, if you don't at the moment, you can also just note it and be in touch with us. The slide and the recording for this session will be made available, and also from time to time we will continue to engage you and provide you with information that would help your growth. All right, over to you now, Adeyemi. So just before I go, two things I want to mention is that we will be having two sessions, not in the immediate, but we'll reach out to you. One that speaks particularly about, technology transfers, especially around, one of the areas by which you may want to explore to be able to increase funding as an institution is how to commercialize research within your institution. So we'll be having a program dedicated, a total boot camp that is dedicated to commercialization of research, and how that can also help your institution to better raise funds and support the entrepreneurs, and even the institution to be able to do more work and more impactful and sustainable work. All right, I immediately over to you.
Thank you very much, Abraham, for that. And then now we will talk about volunteering. So if you are interested in shaping the African HI entrepreneurship ecosystem, like Abraham has said, you have ideas on how to bring HEIs together, on how to better support student entrepreneurs, you can volunteer with us. And my colleague will share this link in the chat box. You can just click this link and apply, and then we'll reach out to you to work together on research outputs, to work together in reaching out to other HEIs within the ecosystem. My colleague Mobolaji will drop the link in a bit, and you can just click through and apply for that. Also, we have a WhatsApp community. So many people have been asking, is there a WhatsApp community? Yes, although you're already part of the bigger community, but if you want to get first-hand information, we share monthly opportunities, and we also have a question bank for answering your question. So the link will be shared in the chat box as well. Please Please click on the link to join the WhatsApp community. The last but not the least is, if you have any feedback or thoughts regarding how the session went, you have comments on how we can improve or what you loved about this session, and even if you have topics that you think you want us to explore in the future, please share with us, and my colleague Mobalaji will share the link in the chat box as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, and it's time for picture. Please put on your camera and wear a smile so that we can take a picture to be posted on social media. Thank you. I'll stop sharing now so that we can put on our cameras. And Constantine will take. So everyone say cheese. Say cheese. Olachi, have you been able to take the picture? Okay, thank you everyone for joining us today. So the very insightful session. We are happy that we were able to gain knowledge and learn a lot from this. And we'll reach out to you in the coming days via email and via WhatsApp on the next steps. Thank you very much, and we wish you a very nice day and week ahead. Bye, everyone.